All right, hi. Hi, everybody. My name is Vic Evans. I'm the lab director of the Bob Mishler Anthropology Lab. We just approved getting that named in honor of Bob. I'm actually going to be sharing a PowerPoint, so give me half a second to do this. Here we go. All right. So I usually am just working in the lab, but I also have taught some classes. And last year we had a very unique opportunity with our archaeology field school students to go out and work on the Navajo Nation. And how that came about was I had a student named Jeremy Begay. He's a graduate student at Highlands. And he's also a cultural resource management archaeologist. And he approached me, he was in one of my classes, and he approached me after class and said, what do you think? Do you think that we could bring a field school out to the Navajo Nation? And I said, yeah, I'm game for anything, right? They had never done this before. The Navajo Nation had never agreed to anything like this before. So this was unique, brand new. So I went to Window Rock, Arizona, and I met up with Tamara Billy, who's the senior archaeologist in the NNHHPD, which is the Navajo Nation Historic and Heritage Preservation Department. We'll just call it the HPD, it's a lot easier. And she and I went over some expectations, and she was very agreeable that we would get to go out and do this. So we did. We went out for about a week. And the exciting thing is that we got to work on a just pristine site. It had never been documented. It certainly had never been excavated, never been pot hunted, and it was a unique experience for us. This was a Pueblo site, prehistoric Pueblo site with little neighboring, maybe farm communities. It was very hard to tell, but it was a good opportunity for our students to get to go out and do this. So the first Navajo, they're Athabascan speakers, which is also what the Apache are. And a lot of people are related through language. And the first Navajo lived up in Western Canada, probably a good 1,000 years ago or so. And when they moved into the Southwest, it's actually kind of hard to tell. There's some different ideas. Some people think they came into the San Juan Basin around 1300 AD. Other people say a little later. Other people say a little earlier. If you talk to Navajo people, they will tell you they've always been here. They came up through 4 worlds, and as each world became unusable, they moved up to the 2nd world and so forth. So, but archaeologists, anthropologists are all in debate over this. In 1868, they made the Navajo Reservation. That's the 1800s, and it was not a very big reservation. It went from Fort Defiance, Chinle, Mini Farms, Shiprock. It was pretty small. Now it is about 27,000 square miles. And it is about 17 million acres, I guess. Just to let you know, it is covered with sites, absolutely covered with sites. Now, Navajo people do not like to mess around where there are ruins, there were ancients. There may be unhappy spirits, chaotic spirits. So they don't tend to mess around on these sites, and nobody else messes around on the sites. So that's why the sites tend to be pristine. And Jeremy Begay's idea was that if we could start making this a real relationship, we could go out with a Navajo archaeologist, it's almost always Jeremy, and be able to document and record these sites, write the reports, do anything else we can do, and give it back to the HPD. And they put it in their archives. So that was what we were hoping to do. Okay, so this little thing right in the middle, that's Hopi. And I'm not even going to go into the politics behind that. We're going to go ahead. So this is an Anasazi timeline. Navajo call these Anasazi sites. Anasazi is a very old word. It's been used in the anthropology, archaeology, literature for a very, very long time. It's Navajo. It does not mean enemy people. A lot of people think it does. It just means ancient ones. And more recently, anthropologists have been making a push to change the name of this pre-Columbian group to Ancestral Pueblo. The reasoning for this is that a lot of the pueblos along the Rio Grande were probably the descendants of people out of Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, and a lot of this middle San Juan region. So the Navajo don't like to use Ancestral Pueblo. They say that it is racist, and they feel an affiliation with these ancient sites. I do get a lot of pushback when I talk about Anasazi, both from Puebloan people and from archaeologists, but I'm just like, you know what? I'm Irish, I'm not Native American. I am not going to presume to say what Navajo or anyone else should be calling their ancestors. Not my job, not my place. Okay, so here is a timeline. This is the time that the particular sites that we documented, we called them the Kuriai sites. Kuriai means lone juniper tree in Navajo. We got permission from the Navajo Nation to name these sites this. The site falls between Basket Maker 3 all the way up into Pueblo 3. And you can see right here, I just put out just some bare bones things that were happening during each of these time periods. Even through Pueblo 2 times, it was pretty rainy, pretty good place for crops, things like that. But they were starting to build things like great houses and tower sites. And the Chaco phenomena pops up during this time. And Chaco is only about 2 hours by drive away from these sites. They're all fairly close together. This site goes all the way into Pueblo 3. It started to get hot and dry again. And you start seeing evidence of violence or, people being prepared for violence. And interestingly enough, we saw evidence that may have been an indicator of violence. Okay, so this is Kuriai site location 1. This is the Great House. I know it just looks like a bunch of rocks, doesn't it? But they actually make a shape on the ground, and you can see what's going on there. We were able to diagnose the time period by looking at diagnostic ceramics from Basket Maker 3 up through Pueblo 3. The most ceramics we found were from Pueblo 2. Now, everything we picked up and looked at, we put right back where we found it. We did not take anything away with us. Navajo have very strict policies about carrying things off. And if you come across a burial, boy, they've got a document that thick that you have to read through, but we didn't, we were lucky. This first site is very, very Mesa Verde. It looks very Mesa Verde. This site where you can see our field school standing, this was a little crescent-shaped set of room blocks, and it was very Chacoan. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. Jeremy was thinking maybe it's sort of a borderland between Mesa Verde and Chaco. We also had Chacoan ceramics. We had Mesa Verde ceramics. And then we also had ceramics that were coming in from Arizona and other places that were a little bit farther away. Okay, so these are our field students, and they are actually blocking out room blocks. Now, when you look at that again, it looks like a bunch of rocks, but actually you can see rock alignments in amongst all this rubble and corners. And so we were identifying the corners and the rock alignments, and we were finding that these room blocks were all relatively the same shape and size, interestingly enough. Okay, and this is the plaza area. This is what the Great House had. It had a plaza, it had at least one kiva, and then a fortified wall around it. The little crescent-shaped room blocks that we found that we think are little farmsteads did not have them, though there is a great kiva that's up on a hillside. And I'll show you that on a map in a little bit. So what I did with my students was I gave them assignments. This is Victoria Bibb right here. She's one of our graduate students. She's just now getting started on her thesis. And I had her do all the mapping. She's very interested in mapping. She'd been working with Joe Zabrowski, and she was very, very interested in this. So I gave her a Garmin and sent her off on her way. And you'll see one of her maps later. This is Lily Ewing. And she's also one of our graduate students, also currently working on her thesis. And she was in charge of looking at ceramics and counting them, how many from each time period, how many that we're looking at. She also helped Victoria with measuring and things like that when we were measuring out these features. This is Elena Jimenez. She had just graduated, but she wanted to come back and do field school with us. She was in charge of lithics. Lithics are stone materials that are made into, it's just sort of lying around. So she was keeping track of the lithics that we were finding. And we found that some of those had been brought in from pretty far away. So that was kind of interesting. Okay, now an interesting thing. This sits on a bluff over the San Juan River. That's a pretty good river. It has a pretty good flow to it. It's even deep in certain places. So we went and just inspected the bluff. And we found that there was a wall sticking out right here. Jeremy told me that there was a flood about 100 years ago that was pretty violent. And we wondered if part of this great house was taken out by the flood. I mean, certainly this wall right here would indicate at least some of it was. Okay, so we spent half of one day at the HPD where the students received a presentation on Navajo beliefs, Navajo traditions, and Navajo archaeology. For one thing, Navajo do not like to excavate. They want to leave everything in place. We would probably learn a lot more if we excavated, but then we would have all those materials we had to do something with. And they don't believe in disturbing these sites. We did learn quite a bit just by doing these surface documentation. When we were done with this, it took most of the morning. We were done with that presentation. Jeremy took us to a variety of other great houses that there's some distance away from the Kodiai sites. This is Skunk Springs right here. These are other great houses. So these places were probably all connected. This is Newcomb House. This is Lily looking at a piece of pottery. A lot of the pottery is the same, and we're finding that. The architecture is the same. And then this is Crumbled House. And the cool thing about Crumbled House is that it's on top of a pretty high mesa, maybe 400 meters. It's pretty big. You can see them looking out over the valley. It is a very fortified Pueblo III great house. And it clearly shows indication of trying to deal with some kind of violence. Was it raiding? Was it fighting? I don't know. Nowadays, people don't go up to Crumbled House at all. The only person who goes to Crumbled House would be a shaman during certain times of the year. And so we were very lucky to get to go up here and look at it. It's an interesting place, kind of hard to get to. You have to go up a very, very steep, narrow path. There's actually what looks like a moat that's been dug out in front of the actual ruin. I don't know what that's about, but it's a deep trench, and they clearly put it there. So that's a very interesting thing. And there's my Charlie's Angels. That's what I call them. They're looking at ceramics, and they're seeing if they see similarities between our site and Crumbled House. Okay, so these are from Crow Canyon, but this is kind of a little representation of what these houses might have looked like. And this is Pueblo 2. You see, we have a kiva, which is a ceremonial place that people would go down inside of here. And they would have ceremonies. They had a little hole in the floor that they called the sipapu, and that was the entry into the other world, or the spirit world. And then you can just see, this is basically what it looked like. And then this is also from Crow Canyon. And this is a Pueblo 3 farmstead. And again, we have these little crescent-shaped villages. This one has 3 kivas in front of it. Our villages, I don't believe for a minute, were that big. Okay, they were a lot smaller, but it was interesting that you're seeing that similar architecture. Okay, and then here's some of the artifacts that we found. And now I'm going to talk about potential violence. So that's the earliest kind of pottery we found. This is from Basket Maker 3. And then this is a Mesa Verde. It's much later, Pueblo 3. And then this is Chacoan. And I love it, little bird feet. It's kind of cute. This is a really cool, strange groundstone piece that they typically find on altars and places like that. And we found that fairly close to the Great House, but kind of in between the Great House and that little crescent-shaped village that's right next to it. This is a basalt, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor. This is a basalt axe. These are all artifacts that are just lying on the ground. Nobody has messed with them. This is a Pueblo point. And then this is burnt jacal. Now, jacal is kind of like a mud-like substance that they use to build with. Site 2, which is about 2 miles, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, 2/10 of a mile northwest of the Great House, was full of this burnt jacal. Now, Jeremy and I both agree it was catastrophically burned. Every single room block had it in there. Was it violence? I don't know. Did it just catch fire and burn down? I mean, that happens too. We don't know. One way that we would know is if we excavated and we found sprawled skeletons, which is what they tend to find. But no, we don't know. But there was evidence of something catastrophic that happened there. And there's Victoria again, and here's one of her maps. Her maps went to the HPD in our report, and I'm very, very proud of her. She's done some remarkable work. Okay, so let's make sure I get the words right. In October, I approached my son-in-law, Eric Allerid, who runs Desert Gate Internet and Genesis Computers with his partner, Ron Doss. And I said, I understand you just bought a drone. If I get permission, do you think you would be willing to come out and fly a drone over this site? And so I talked to the HPD, and we had a lot of conversation about this. They had never allowed drones flown over there before. I made it very, very clear that I had no interest in frightening people, upsetting people's livestock, or being, just interfering with people's privacy. So I finally got their permission. They were okay with it. And of course, Jeremy Begay came out with us. And Eric said, yeah, we'll do it. And so he brought his drone out. And then the Forest and Watershed Institute here at Highlands, under the direction of Kent Reed, they sent Katie Withnall out, who's a pilot, and she brought her very, very fancy dancy drone and made us just a beautiful map. And I'm going to show that to you. So here they are. Here's Eric's drone, and it's setting off. You can kind of see the landscape. It's pretty dry. And then here it is way up in the air, and we're all watching it. That's Jeremy and his cultural resource management crew, and they're all Navajo. And then there's Katie launching her drone. One thing I want to say real quick is that whenever we finished out at these sites, we gave the site an offering of either tobacco or ground corn or something like that. And we thanked the ancients for allowing us to be on their site. And we also wanted to tell them to please not follow us home. Some of my Navajo friends think that maybe they did follow me home, and that's why I've been so ill. And they've given me a couple of ceremonies to do just to try and speed things along. But anyway, we were not disrespectful. We were extremely respectful. So here's the map that Katie made for us with her beautiful drone. And again, I want to thank Kent Reed and that Patty Dappin and Katie for doing that. It's just amazing. Those are our trucks. Here's the Great House. Over here is Site 2. This is the site that catastrophically burned. Over here, and I don't know if you can even see it, there's a little tiny horseshoe. That is Site 3. And it had like 9 room blocks, and you can see it's crescent shaped. And then down up here on the hill, if you see a circle, that is Great Kiva. So we still have work to do. We need to do a foot survey over this entire area and see if we find any agricultural features. Now, to wrap this up, this is the video that came from, this came from Eric Allered and Desert Gate. My daughter Rowan put this together, and we sent this to the NNHPD so that they had this. Here's the San Juan River. You can see that it's a pretty good river. I mean, it's got a pretty good flow. And you can see a lot of vegetation around it, but once you get out here, this is all high desert. It was very, very, very hot and dry. And I'm probably going to speed this up a little bit because it goes on for several minutes. And otherwise, we're seeing the same thing. There is the Great House site. You can see our cars there. This is Site 2 right here. It's very hard to see what it is, but when you're on the ground, you can really start telling what these things are. Let's see, let's speed it up a little bit more. These are just donut hole, you know, these are where people have driven their trucks in circles. There's nothing specific about that. But you can see there's the Kiva and the plaza, okay? And you can see this great big fortified wall around Site 1, the Great House. That really suggests that they were trying to protect themselves from somebody or something. Okay, let me just speed it up. It kind of goes on slowly, but you can, there's the Kiva right there. We're back at Site 2. One thing that Jeremy Begay and I noticed, that's Jeremy I'm standing with right there. One thing that we noticed was that there's more to Site 2 than we realized, because we were out in October when the weeds and everything had died back and the ground cover wasn't there. So we're gonna have to go back in there and start mapping the rest of this and see what else it is. But really good places to have sites, a good place to do your farming, you know, have your community, good area for water and things like that. So I'll speed this up a little bit more. There it is again. You can see the Kiva very clearly. And that's pretty much all of this video that I was going to show you. This drainage is probably down cut quite a bit, but my feeling is that there was probably a drainage there back in the day as well. So I think we can call this done. Do you guys have any questions? Let me stop share so I can see your faces. Whoops. Anybody have any questions?
Hey, Vic.
Hey, Sean.
I was reading a book on the Pueblo revolts, and the archaeologist, I forget his name, was talking about a lot of non-destructive techniques like ground penetrating radar. How do Navajos feel about those techniques? And if you were able to use them, what would you expect to find on a site like that with that equipment?
That's a really good question. First of all, I think that the Navajo that I'm working with at the HPD would be perfectly fine with anything we bring in. I don't even touch it unless I get their okay, and usually we have to have conversations. Ground penetrating radar, yeah, we might be able to at least tell where walls are and things like that. We don't have that equipment available to us. Kent Reed has offered a handheld LiDAR, which would be pretty cool to use, where you just walk through a site and it's taking measurements and things. But yeah, it goes through the Navajo Nation. They have to make sure it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. And actually, I remembered it was Matthew Liebman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it was really interesting. His obviously he worked really closely with the Pueblos.
Yeah,
And,
the books on there's more than one book out there on the Pueblo revolts, but it's pretty interesting time period. One of the sites that we were supposed to go to this past summer, and we weren't able to go to because of COVID, and then I was too ill, was a transitional site when it was the Spanish were in the Southwest in Mexico, but they hadn't come into the area yet. And it sounded like a unique site and also very rare, just one that has not been looked at. And again, the most exciting thing about this project is our students are learning about Navajo, and they're learning about Navajo archaeology, and they're learning about that culture. And we're getting to look at these incredibly pristine sites. So any other questions?
What does the future hold for you in this site?
We need to finish it. We need to go back and look at site 2, the one that was burnt, and find the rest of it. We need to record site 3 a little more thoroughly. I would like to do a foot survey across that area to see if there are any agricultural features that we just couldn't see in the maps and stuff. And then we would probably move on to this other site that Jeremy was telling me about. But it's kind of up to the HPD. If they may say, you know what, we have this historic Hogan site, and would you be willing to go look at that? And we'll do whatever they want us to do, because it's a wonderful experience.
Yeah, it sounds exciting.
It is. I love it. Any other questions? God, you guys are like my class.
I'm not wearing pajamas, so.
Yeah, okay. Sometimes I say, I feel like I'm in a seance. Are you there? Are you there? Okay, well, I'm done, guys.
Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to go ahead and drop a couple of those links. I realized that was going to come up in the middle of your presentation in the chat. So does anyone have any other questions for Vic and her interesting, fascinating work on the nation?
Funny how shy people are.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and thank you so much, Vic. This was very interesting.
Oh, thanks. Well, it was fun. Yeah, I find it interesting for sure. Thank you, guys.